Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well. Today I'm going to look at another game in the TCEC 17 Superfinal between Leela and Stockfish. And again, in this game Leela is playing with the white pieces and Stockfish is playing with the black pieces. And this is game number 26 in the Superfinal. In this game the book moves were actually a Slav defence, so it went d4, d5, c4, c6, and then knight to f3, knight to f6, knight to c3, takes on c4, a4, and the point of a4 in this opening is to stop black from playing b5, and white will take on c4 at a later date. Bishop g4, knight to e5, attacking the pawn and the bishop. The bishop went to h5, f3, knight to d7, and then knight takes c4, and now we're into the end of the book moves. And here Stockfish played their first move, which was e5, so already undermining this d4 pawn. And there's a little trick here, because if white takes this off with d takes e5, black has this nice check against the king, and a move later will take the knight on c4. Knight takes e5 may also look tempting, but black can just simply take, and after takes, play knight to d7, and black actually has a really even game. And again, no problems for either side, to be honest, it's just dead equal. But Leela decided to play this differently. Instead of taking, she just played knight to e4 instead. Bishop b4 check was played, white blocks it, queen e7, typical move supporting the bishop, and Leela takes, the queen recaptured, and now queen to d2 was played. Now of course if black takes this knight off, then knight d6 check can be played, forking the king and queen. So actually there was a trade of queens, queen takes queen, Leela captured with the king, and maintains this attack on the e5 pawn with the pawn on d4 and knight on c4. So black takes on d4. This is probably what Stockfish has to play, and then basically now Leela just checks the king went to e7, and Leela wins her pawn back with knight takes b7, and now rook c8 from Stockfish. So now Leela starts juggling these two knights around with quite interesting positions. So she first puts it on d6, attacks the rook goes to d8, so we go back and forth one time, and now Leela actually plays e4. b4 was interesting to me, but I think black can play knight to a6, attacking b4, forcing white to play b5. After an exchange of knights and rook ac8, I think we all agree maybe black stands better here with the doubled rooks, and the rooks coming into ideas like c2 check, and this looks very nice for black. So yeah, in this position Leela played e4, Stockfish en passant, d takes e3, king takes e3, rook c7 attacking the knight, and knight c to e5, which is a very interesting place to put the other knight. So basically just supporting one another. And Stockfish drops their knight into b6, but now there's a nice outpost for Leela's knight on c5. Stockfish puts that other knight into d7, and interestingly now the knight goes to a6, attacking the rook on c8, and the knight on a5 does a great job of stopping the rook going into b7. So forcing Stockfish to go backwards. And I've just highlighted these two knights at the moment. They do say knights on the rim are dim, but here actually they come together quite nicely. And there's no way for black to attack these really, because the a7 pawn just blocks the attack from the rooks. So it's really interesting, weird position, to be quite honest. Never seen anything quite like this. But anyway, Leela continues with king to f2, getting the king to safety. f6 was played, and now b4. And again, these two knights are super solid. The knight on a6 supports the b4 pawn, and this bishop on f1 does a great job of supporting the knight on a6. So king f8 was played, and bishop e2, knight d5, rook to d1, makes sense, getting on the open files, knight to e5, and rook to d4, supporting b4 once again. Stockfish jumps their knight into c3, and Leela puts her knight back into c5 to support this a4 pawn, allowing them to manoeuvre this rook any space they want to. Bishop f7 makes a lot of sense from Stockfish, putting their bishop on a better diagonal. The knight jumps in to b7, and Stockfish now captures on e2, so knight takes e2, king takes, and rook c7 from Stockfish. So I think if we just pause it here, I think white's actually doing a bit better now. The two knights are really more dynamic than black's pieces, and basically I think Leela just wants to double rooks perhaps, and just launch this a pawn to a6 if they can. So play continued with a5. I think Leela does want to play a6 at some point. Rook e7 was played first though, threatening a discovered attack against the king with this knight. So the king moves to f2, and now bishop d5, which supports the c6 pawn and also blocks the d file. And I think maybe black wants to also get a knight in to c4, so for this reason Leela puts the rook in c1. But now a6 is played by Stockfish, so stopping white from playing a6. However, do you really want to play a6 here as black, because this knight on c5 is actually attacking it, inadvertently anyway, but I suppose the rook is attacking b7. But if everything gets traded off, this a6 pawn could become rather weak. But saying that, I guess the pawn's on a white square, so it could potentially be supported by the bishop with this type of manoeuvre. Who knows? All I know is knight d6 was played next. The rook went to a7. The knight went to a4. Stockfish played rook d8. The knight jumps into f5 for Leela. King e8, rook d1, knight c4, knight c5, and then h5, knight g3, rook b8. And I looked at knight takes h5 here for white, but again black just takes on b4. If rook e1 check, I don't think white's got anything here after king f7. Can try rook g4, but then just comes rook b2, king g3, and king f8 is absolutely fine because this rook on a7 protects the g7 pawn. So yeah, I did look at knight takes h5, but Leela just decided to protect the pawn on b4 with knight to d3, protecting the pawn. And now I wondered why Stockfish played their next move. The next move was king f7, but the pawn on h5 is still attacked. So I looked at g6 here, and I wondered why black didn't play this, but it becomes obvious quite soon. Leela can play knight to e4, attacking the f6 pawn, so if black protects this with king e7, white can play knight to c3, attacking the bishop on d5 twice. If black plays rook d7 to protect this bishop, then white can play knight c5, attacking the rook. If the rook goes back to d8, then knight takes a6. And if the rook goes to a7 to protect a6, then knight takes d5 check, pawn takes, and knight to d3 to protect the b4 pawn. And the rook's also attacking d5 now. If rook d8 to protect, then white just plays knight to f4, attacking two pawns at the same time. Now you may be wondering, okay, why can't black just play maybe king f7, because then in this variation the pawn will be protected? Well, in this position, if king f7 instead of king e7, then I think white can just take off this knight with rook takes, and if bishop takes, there's knight to d6 check, and white will take this bishop off next move. So I hope that clears things up as to why maybe black didn't play g6 and protect their h-pawn. It just leads to a lost position. So Stockfish did play king f7, and white just wins a pawn. Knight takes h5 was played. Stockfish played g5, and Leela's knight just went back to g3. And now we're into quite a long endgame. So continuing on, knight to a3 was played. Rook c1. Knight to b5 attacking the rook. The rook went to g4, which looks like a weird move, but then bishop e6 to hit the rook. Rook e4, bishop d5 to hit the rook again. And the rook just drops back to e2 with Stockfish playing king to g6. So Leela now reroutes the knights, knight to f1. The knight goes into d4 to attack e2. So Leela protects their b4 pawn. Knight to f5, knight c5, and now white's got a great outpost for the knight. The rook comes to h8 though, attacking this h2 pawn. It is protected by the knights, so it's not under attack yet. Leela plays rook d1. The rook goes to h4 though. I think this rook h4 just gives this rook more scope. It attacks b4, so sort of limits this rook on b2. But Leela just plays h3, so now white is free to manoeuvre this knight around again, so it's no longer chained to this h2 pawn. King f7 was played, knight to e3. And finally we get a trade of knights. Stockfish puts a rook on e7 with check. The king goes back and forces the rook back to protect a6 against the knight on c5. Knight goes into a4, rook c7, knight c5 again, and we just get a bit of back and forth here, with now Leela playing rook to d2, the rook goes to f4, and basically this is what we call high-class computer shuffling. And for a long time here in this game, both sides just manoeuvre the rooks and pieces around without really doing anything. So it's not really much to say about all this, but we've seen it multiple times, so we're quite used to it now. It's just a bit annoying. So I should go back here. Knight went to b6, hitting the bishop. Bishop goes to e6. And now just rook c1. king f6, and I've put a bit of an arrow here, so the rook's attacking b4, and the point now is that white wants to get their king into c3, protecting the b4 pawn, which then allows this rook to move on b2 and give it some freedom. So that's the aim for white over the next couple of moves. We'll see. King e3 is played, bishop to f7, rook c5, the king goes to g6, and now Leela moves their king to d3, rook e5, king g6, and now king to c3. So it protects the b4 pawn, and now the rook can move to d2 or e2. And white has a very nice position, just a pawn up. Most likely I think Leela will put the rook into d2 and just sort of threaten ideas like check, and yeah, white's got an incredibly nice position. So Stockfish has to do something. They play g4, white captures, black recaptures, and of course white doesn't recapture again because it gives black more opportunities. So rook e4 is played instead, pinning the g4 pawn. c5 is played, so Stockfish again tries to open things up. If white takes this off, I think this favours black, because then they can just check, and if king d4, just rook takes a5. So Leela's wise to this, she just plays b5. There's a trade of pawns. King h5 is played to protect the rook on h4, but now just g3, attacking the rook. The rook goes to h1, allowing Leela to pick up another pawn. Rook takes g4. And now we're on to move 87, but believe it or not, there's 181 moves in this game. So I'm going to play through the next couple of moves quite quickly. So rook a1, rook a4 getting behind the pawn, rook f1 to attack f3. Again rook f4, king g6, a6 pushing the pawn up. Leela gets behind her pawn, bishop e6, the king goes to d2, there's a check, king e3, rook b2 attacking the knight, which jumps into a4, attacking the rook and the pawn. A check is given, and pins the knight against the rook on a5. But now just rook takes c5 because the rook on f4 protects the knight. Rook a2 check, king e3, and black does indeed take off this a6 pawn finally. But still, white is 2 pass pawns up here. And I think, to be honest, Leela messes about quite a bit now. I think she should launch these 2 pawns up the board, as we'll see. So knight c3 is played, the rook pins it, but then there's a load of ridiculous moves here. So finally Leela does push some pawns, but we get to see this weird chase going on. So the 2 rooks just move around, there's a trade of rooks, and this is where we get ridiculous. So this rook just chases this bishop around. It's like hide and seek. I'm not sure what's going on here, it's a bit stupid. Play continues on, again this rook just chases this bishop and wastes a lot of moves. To be honest, white should just start pushing these 2 pawns. I think a human player would do this. But again we see Leela playing with her food. It would make more sense if the computers could tire each other out, but it makes no logical sense for the computers to do this. But anyway, I'm just going to play through these moves very fast because there's not really much to learn. Basically all I need to do is push these 2 pawns up. So play continues on even further. Finally get f5. So Leela does start launching these pawns up the board. And after a few more moves, eventually we get to move 170. A very long game. And finally f6, another pawn push. And Leela gets a rook onto the 7th rank, which is very good, and knight to f5, bishop f7, knight to e7. And eventually the king gets into a good position. So here, rook a8 is played with check, rook d8, takes, and finally Leela wins the game and Stockfish resigns. And why is this? Well, I guess white's got an easy win, just king to g7 looks like it's nice. And if king to e8, I guess we can just go knight to e5, and if the bishop moves, we can even just check and takes, easy win, the pawns and the queen. So yeah, that was not the most beautiful game in the world, and it was a bit ridiculous, as I said in my previous video. This computer shuffling, or high level shuffling, looks a bit stupid sometimes, especially when that rook was chasing that bishop around. I don't know what that was about. But yeah, hope you enjoyed my quick analysis of this game. I'll post more very soon between these 2 giants of the game. If you haven't already, please do drop a like, comment and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. And hopefully I'll try and post a video very soon. And thank you all for watching and stay safe.